Welcome to Career and Leadership Real Talk, the no-nonsense guide for ambitious managers who want to have more impact and progress their career. I'm Pamela Langan, a job search coach and expert CV writer specialising in helping frustrated professionals land the jobs and pay rises they know they deserve.
And I'm Jackie Jagger, a leadership and mindset coach specialising in helping newly promoted and new to role leaders to avoid the dickhead trap and lead with confidence. Between us, we've helped hundreds of leaders and managers to find new roles, take ownership of their careers, and handle the challenges that job searches and leadership responsibility inevitably bring. And now we're joining forces to share with you what we know has worked for our clients.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode. Today, we are talking about making mistakes because we know that we all make them and how we handle them really impacts us as leaders and just in general. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about some of the best practices, and we're going to talk about how you can own your mistakes and overcome them and really get underneath of what went wrong and what you can do going forward. So you can kick us off, Jackie. What do you do when you make a mistake?
I think even before we talk about that, it's important to just normalise that people do make mistakes. I think for so many people, it feels if you make a mistake, I've worked in HR, the worst possible feeling is that thing of somebody sent an email out with everybody's salary on. And in every company I've worked for, either someone's done it or someone's known of someone that's done it somewhere else. And so you always have, mistakes will always happen. But like you say, it's how you handle that really defines you. And I think that's a really important point to make, because the kind of prevailing message out there and the feeling that we have is that there's something wrong with us if we make a mistake. And that's just not the case. I think just normalizing the fact that mistakes happen and that people do make them is really important. And it doesn't say anywhere near as much about you as it does the way you handle the mistakes that you make.
Yeah, and that is a really good point, because I think we're so worried about making mistakes, but the only way that we're actually going to learn anything is to make mistakes, to learn from them, and then to move on from them as well. So I think you're right. We do need to normalize that it's okay to make mistakes. I just feel like we live in a time and a place where, making mistakes isn't something that is actively encouraged. And when it happens, it does tend to feel like the end of the world. And you go through so many emotions, don't you, when you make a mistake? Just the thought now of some of the things that happened back in my corporate days, and it makes you feel sick, and you worry about your reputation and what are people going to think about me, and you just spiral, don't you? And it's so hard, but it's almost owning it, isn't it? And saying, yeah, I am going to make mistakes because I am human. It doesn't define me as a person.
And almost as well, pushing it further even, I would argue, if you haven't made mistakes, if you haven't had things go wrong, if you haven't had a time where what you hoped for and wanted hasn't been the outcome that you've got, you're not pushing hard enough. You are not stretching yourself, because if you've genuinely never made mistakes, you are spending your entire time operating within your comfort zone, within the bounds of what you're already capable of and able to do and confident to be able to deliver. So I would argue that actually, if you look back the last 12 months and can't think of any mistakes, then question yourself of, am I operating in my comfort zone? Am I not putting myself out there enough? Am I not pushing? And that can be for other reasons as well. It can be for overwhelm and workload and what have you. But yeah, for me, it's that piece of just acknowledge that we are meant to learn from mistakes. We're meant to get things wrong. We're meant to get outcomes that we didn't hope for. And if you don't ever have that, then you're keeping yourself playing small.
Yeah, that is actually a really good point, because if you are operating in your comfort zone, then you're not going to make mistakes. You're not going to grow. You're not going to push yourself to that next level. And I do think that making the odd mistake through growth, or just through generally making a mistake, is actually okay. And what I always ask myself, and things that I'll always reflect on, are things like, what did I learn from this? What will I do differently going forward? And I suppose it's always about looking for the learning, isn't it? Like when you make that mistake, like what am I learning right now? What did I learn? Even if we're looking back and reflecting on mistakes that we've made, what did I learn? I think most people bury mistakes. I don't think people to reflect on mistakes. I could be wrong. I could just be talking from my own opinion, my own perspective. But I think if you make a mistake, human nature is to bury it, get rid of it quickly, not think about it again, hope that we can do some damage limitation and just quickly move on from it and forget about it. But that is where I think we're making a huge mistake, because it's a great opportunity to learn, isn't it?
Love that point. Yeah, absolutely. And it's certainly not just you. I definitely have been in that place, and there's good reason for it. So your brain wants to keep you safe. And when you experience that kind of heart in mouth moment where you just, oh God, what's happened? You recognize that something's gone wrong. The natural instinct, your brain wanting to keep you safe, will want to distance you from it. It will want to hide it, bury it, turn away from it, not reflect on it, because reflecting on it brings up those uncomfortable feelings and emotions again. So we are wired to want to try and avoid those uncomfortable, unpleasant emotions. But you're absolutely right. In itself, that is a huge mistake, because then you still made the mistake and you haven't got the learning from it.
Yeah, and I suppose that's the issue, isn't it? Because if we can make mistakes and learn and grow, then we'll make different mistakes. We'll make better mistakes maybe in the future as we are learning and growing. So I suppose the key thing is when it happens and it feels rubbish, doesn't it? When you have that realization that you've made a mistake and you think, what the hell have I done? And I think you go into panic mode, don't you? And you can't think straight. And all of these things start running through your mind. What are people going to think? What can I do? How can I fix it? Who's being impacted? Who's being affected? All of that stuff starts running through your head. And then all of a sudden you can't think straight. You don't know how to fix it. And it's like, what do you do? Because sometimes I think when it happens in work, especially, you can't always talk to people about it. You haven't always got that person that you can confide in or help you get it back on track. So, what would you say the first thing when you realize that and you start spiraling and feeling like it's the worst thing in the world? What is the first thing that you would do?
For me, part of my coaching framework when I'm talking about people as leaders is the three options and three different ways that people need to show up as leaders. So you've got to lead yourself, you've got to lead others, and you've got to lead the business. And lead yourself always comes first, because until you are leading yourself well, you can't lead others well, you can't lead the business. So job number one is you've got to get yourself from that emotional state where all of that spiraling is happening, where your focus is on how terrible it feels that you've made this mistake, and you've got to calm your nervous system and get yourself to a place where you can then start to think logically. So do not make decisions, do not rush into things when you recognize that you're feeling those emotions. You've got to take a breath and manage your own reaction to it. And then you can start to move to the logical steps. And the logical steps become quite obvious once you have calmed yourself. First of all, you've got to acknowledge that it's happened, and you've got to then understand, like you said, what are the consequences of this mistake? You need to admit it and take responsibility. But sometimes people will try and do that. And then the first thing that happens is that somebody asks you the question of, what are the consequences? Who's impacted? All those other questions that you just rattled through. And so if you admit it and take responsibility before you've given any thought to those things, you can actually make the situation worse, because you lose other people's faith in you, but you don't have the ability to be in a place where you can be part of a potential solution or fix or rectify what's happened. So I would always say, don't admit it and take responsibility and apologize necessarily immediately. Often some of that other rational thought needs to come first. So what is the mistake? What are the consequences? Who's impacted? And if you can, what would need to happen to rectify it are all good, helpful thoughts before you tell other people that you've made that mistake. Sometimes you have no choice. Sometimes other people know at the same time that you do. But in an ideal world, if you become aware of something and you know that you're going to have to fess up to it, do some of that logical thinking first.
Yeah. And I suppose as well, even if it's sprung on you, even if other people know at the same time, or even if somebody else brings it to your attention and you just think, oh my goodness. And it is taking that breath, isn't it? Taking that minute and even just saying to somebody or whoever's brought it to your attention or whoever's looking for answers, let me have a look at this and come back to you so that you can explore what's happened, where it's gone wrong, and come up with some potential solutions. Obviously, depending on how business critical it is, you might need to do that faster. You might have a little bit more time, but you do need to push back and say, let me just look into this and let me see what's happened. And almost suppose creating that process before you've even made a mistake. So if you're thinking, I've not made a mistake in a while and I dread making mistakes, this is a really good time, if you're listening to the podcast now, to think, okay, what would I do? What would be my thought process? And you can then have that process ready to kick into action should you make a mistake going forward. And it's almost then, I feel, if you've got a plan, if you make a mistake, it makes it easier to go through that process, and it makes it easier to push forward and do the things that aren't as comfortable. Because if you make a mistake, it's okay. You know what you're going to do. You know how you can rectify that.
It's brilliant advice. And it comes back to how our brains work, because what you're describing is a process of mental rehearsal. And the whole point of that is exactly as you say, that then when the situation happens for real, then you've got a plan. Your brain knows. I remember years ago when I was tiny, I got lost twice in a supermarket, and my parents taught me, if you can't see us, walk along the middle section and look left and look right into the aisles and just keep doing that until you see us. You will always see us. So the next time it happened, my brain had that advice. So that's what I did. So instead of ending up bawling my eyes out at customer services like I had before, my brain's got a plan. And that's such good advice for so many different situations, but particularly because making mistakes brings up all of that emotional stuff. Having a plan for things that could bring up a lot of emotion is incredibly valuable, because then it does kick in exactly as you describe. So yeah, it's brilliant advice. And I think it's really helpful for people to reflect on and to go, okay, what mistakes could happen? What have other people done? What else has happened? What's the worst thing that could happen? And if it happened, what would I do?
Yeah. And I think that is the point, isn't it? If it does happen, what will I do? And I suppose one of the senior leaders that I used to work for quite a few years ago, his kind of philosophy on making mistakes was fail fast, but let's just keep moving forward. Because if we are going to grow as people, if we're going to grow businesses, if we're going to really drive things forward, then mistakes are inevitable. They're going to happen. And I absolutely love that advice when he said fail fast, because what he was basically saying was, I know you're going to make mistakes and I know that things are going to happen. But if you do that, if you go through the process, you fail fast, you learn from it, and we keep moving forward, that is how we're going to grow the business. And that created a real culture of, let's just keep moving forward. If we do fail, if we do make a mistake, what happened? We don't need to overanalyze it. We just need to take the learnings and keep moving forward.
I think that's a really important point, because for most of our podcast listeners, they're already in management or leadership roles. And it's such a good role model to be the person that normalizes it for your team. And I think that's particularly hard to do if you're in an organizational culture where that's not how you feel you would be treated, because you've got that fear that if one of your team screws up, then that's going to reflect on you. But the more that you can create that culture within your team where you can normalize it, it makes it easier for people to own up to stuff. It makes it easier for them to tell you when it's happened so that you get proper notice and you can then seek to rectify what's happened. But like you say, more than that, it's going to stretch and grow the team as a whole. That's the whole theory of growth mindset, is that the people who have the most success also have the most failures, and that without failure, then you don't learn, you don't get the feedback to understand what's the better thing to do. Why does that work and that doesn't? How do I develop and grow? So I love that you had that from a leader, because I think very few people do have that role model. And so if you're listening to this and you've got a team, you can be that role model for your team.
Yeah, and I think that is amazing, isn't it? If you can start to implement that into the way that you work, so your team have got that feeling of safety, and also they're able to drive the business forward because they know they've got that level of safety and they can learn and grow with it. I think one of the things that I did when I was in a leadership position, I used to, if my team made a mistake, I would always take responsibility for that. And I would always protect my team and always stand forward and say, we've made a mistake, we're dealing with it, this is the action plan. And in the background, I'd be working with that team member and making sure that they were okay, making sure that they fully understood what had happened, why it had happened, and also looking at what the solutions were. And I found that quite easy to do, to take that responsibility. I didn't necessarily find it easy to make those mistakes myself. So I would be really happy to take responsibility for my team, but making mistakes from a personal point of view would really affect me, because like you say, it is stepping outside your comfort zone, isn't it? And it was easy for me to take responsibility for my team's mistakes, but not as easy for me to accept and move through the mistakes that I'd made myself. And you do get that feeling as you're going through, what will people think of me if I make a mistake? Will this make me look bad? Will it damage my reputation? I don't want people to think bad things about me, or that I'm not up for the job, and all of these things that used to go through my mind. But one of the things that I realized was that making mistakes, admitting to them, dealing with them, sorting out what has gone wrong and getting everything back on track actually helped build my reputation and helps people to see me from the perspective of somebody who will keep moving forward, somebody who's ambitious, somebody who will drive forward and achieve what we need to achieve, but also somebody that will accept and admit to mistakes and deal with them and resolve them. But that did take a while. I'm not going to say that was something that came really easy to me, because accepting my team mistakes, that came easy to me. I could do that. I would take them under my wing. I would help them, support them, coach them through it. But when it came to me, it didn't feel good. And if it at some point really did knock my confidence as well.
Just as you were describing there, I was thinking back to the episode we did a few weeks ago about the difference between confidence and self-belief. And I think being able to understand and accept yourself despite having made mistakes is really that fundamental self-belief layer. It's that point of when you're really okay with you and who you are and what you're about, then the fear of other people's judgment is lessened. The fear of making mistakes is lessened. When you are a bit fragile in terms of your own belief in your potential and what you're capable of, then a mistake doesn't just knock your confidence at a surface level, it actually chips away at your self-belief, because it's more evidence to feed that story that you're telling yourself of, I'm not good enough, I'm not up to the job, what if people find out? And as you were talking, that's the thing that struck me, was how many times when you see people in organizations who are the people who you would trust, that you'd want them on your side, in an emergency, if it was panic stations, you'd be like, oh my God, I really want to be in their camp if things go wrong. It is often the people who have got themselves a reputation for being able to fix things. And why can they fix things? Because things go wrong. And so they openly will acknowledge that something's gone wrong and they will move into that resolution mode. And that's the reputation that you actually build for yourself. And I think when you keep that inside in your own head, as opposed to acknowledging and admitting, you rob yourself of that opportunity to build your self-belief and build your external reputation, because what you're focused on is this kind of, catastrophizing, this story going on in your head of making meaning from it, making a mistake mean that you're not good enough. Nobody said that a mistake means you're not good enough. You can tell yourself that story, or you can say, okay, making a mistake means I need to find a way to resolve it, and I need to find a way to not make the same mistake again. And you can attach whatever meaning you prefer, but I can tell you which one will be more helpful for your career.
Yeah, and that is such a good point, isn't it? Because I do feel like if you can get your head around the fact that it is okay to make mistakes and create that plan for yourself, when you find yourself in that situation, that you know what to do, you know how to take action, you know that your head will be all over the place, there'll be a million thoughts running through your head, and you just need to stop and go, right, okay, what actually has happened? And one of the things I used to do is ask myself, in 12 months, will this really be a big deal? In 5 years, will I look back on this and think this is the worst mistake I've ever made? And that sometimes puts it into perspective. Even if you think like next week, will this even still be an issue? Sometimes you can build things up and you go through the whole kind of that stress of the mistake making feeling, and everybody that's listening that's ever made a mistake will know what I'm talking about. Like, your heart sinks, you feel sick, you can't think straight. But if you acknowledge and accept the fact that's going to be part of your growth and you've got a plan to deal with it, then I just feel like it does help you grow as a person, as a leader. And I definitely found that for me. Like, when obviously still making mistakes now still doesn't feel great, because you're like, oh, what have I done now? But now the way I deal with making mistakes compared to me 10 years ago is completely different, because I'm more likely to look at it from a real logical perspective and think my way around it and give myself the space to do that. Whereas 10 years ago, me would have been running around like a headless chicken. What will people think of me? Probably even writing a resignation letter, because I can't cope with the fact that I've messed up. And in reality, it's probably, or was probably, only something really small.
And I think what can make it harder is when the consequences and the ramifications of mistakes are significant. If you make a mistake that's put a business or a section of a business at risk in terms of public image or reputation, for example, or in terms of financial consequences, or when you make a mistake that has an impact on a lot of people. So like I was saying about the HR mistake of if you send everybody's salaries, that feels horrible because it's not just you that it impacts, it's a lot of other people who are having personal information accidentally shared. And I think those kinds of situations do make it harder because we feel a sense of responsibility for others and for the business. So sometimes it's harder if the consequences are not on us. But I also just want to pick up on what you said about stress, because certainly in my work with leaders over the last kind of couple of years, a huge amount of the leaders that I work with, when people are at a senior level, there's this epidemic of people working crazy hours, not having the boundaries that they need to have, desperately trying to prove themselves. And we did the episode on the stages of burnout. And I think it's really important as well to acknowledge that a lot of mistakes come from the situation where people under constant pressure and they feel this degree of stress for a prolonged period. And I think those, again, people find harder to forgive themselves for things that seem like they're tiny mistakes, seem like, why did I make that mistake? There's no logical reason why I made it. The logical reason why you made that mistake could be that you were under a stupid amount of pressure for a prolonged period. That's impacted how your brain's functioning, how your nervous system is functioning, And that's the cause of what's happened. And unless you address that, then that's going to be the situation again. So I think it's really important in those types of scenarios where the impacts are elsewhere or where it was an avoidable mistake that just you want to kick yourself for, to actually be kind and compassionate to yourself and to treat yourself. If a friend, ask yourself that question, if a friend of mine came and said they'd done this, would I think less of them? Would I kick them while they were down? No, I wouldn't. So be gentle with yourself when those types of things happening. Forgive yourself and be compassionate.
Yeah, that is really good advice, because I know in the past when I've made mistakes, the first thing I'll do is tell myself how stupid I am and really start laying into myself, when actually that is not the time to be pulling yourself down. And you're right. Would you say that to a friend who made a mistake? No, you're not. If a friend comes to you and says, I've made a massive mistake, then, or I've made a mistake, then you're going to say, okay, what is it? Let me see if I can help you. Tell me about it. Let's see what we can do. You're not going to turn around and start telling them how stupid they are, but you do that to yourself, don't you? Just because it's almost like that natural reaction.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I would pick up on from what you said before was about that reflection time. Because again, when people are really busy, reflection time generally gets sacrificed. And also, I think for a lot of leaders, they're quite action oriented, they're quite future focused. And again, reflection can be the thing that gets missed because it doesn't have an instantly realizable value. You don't know, if you sit down and spend an hour reflecting, what's going to come from it or what the value of that time is. If you sit down and work for an hour on this project that's running behind, you feel like you've got a sense of, at least I'll have progressed that project. So I think people undervalue reflection. And I went away recently. The messages I sent to you, you were like, what the hell have you been drinking? Because I was only working part days. I wasn't doing any client work. And actually the creativity and the thoughts and kind of the ideas that fizzed when I had time and space, it was a really good reminder to me of the value of headspace and time and reflection. So yeah, I just wanted to pick up on that you'd said as well.
Yeah, and I do feel like that is the key to everyone's personal development, giving themselves the time and the space for that reflection. Because, just headspace, just a little bit of space. And even if you feel like you've got a million other things to do, it's just like going, right, no, I'm dedicating this time now, even if it's just sitting there in silence or journaling, starting with a blank page and just writing one prompt at the top and just giving yourself that space to download your brain. It just really helps with that creativity. And I do feel like that level of reflection also helps if you have made a mistake, because rather than burying it, if you go back over it, even if it feels uncomfortable and awkward and you want to forget about it, and it, like, a lot of the time when you've made a mistake, it'll make you cringe, like going back over it. I do just feel though there's a lot of value in doing that, because the more you can learn from that situation, the better you will be in the future and the better you'll handle those situations in the future as well.
Absolutely. I feel like this is a topic we could talk all day on, but that's going to bring us to the end of the episode. So as ever, thank you so much for listening. We will be back next week with another one. And in the meantime, if you know of someone who would benefit from this episode or find it valuable, then please do share it with them. And please do rate and review us on your favourite podcast platforms. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you again next time. Exciting news from us. If you're an ambitious leader or manager earning 50k or more and you're ready to take your career to the next level, we have an opportunity for you. Introducing Catalyst Career Club, your secret weapon for unlocking career success. As a member, you'll get access to monthly live training sessions, exclusive job opportunities, and the ability to get personalised advice from us on your toughest career challenges.
We've helped thousands of driven leaders like you secure significant pay rises, land dream roles, and thrive in their careers. And now we want to support you in achieving your most ambitious career goals too. Membership is just $6.99 per month with no contract or tie-in. And as a special bonus for being our podcast listeners, you can use the code podcast at checkout to get your first month for just £1. Head over to pamelalangan.com/Catalyst Career Club to sign up now, and we'll see you inside.